911, what's your emergency?
Help, my new boss is here and he's from Nebraska.
I think you mean Minnesota.
Ugh, even worse.
I think that works. I think you had just enough venom in your voice. Yeah.
I do love that I said I was going to do a Sal impression and just fully didn't.
It's okay.
I was going to be like, "Oh, what? Oh, my boss is here and he's from fucking Nebraska.
My boss is here and he's from Nebraska."
I love that, in the episode Sal says there's only New York and LA and everything else is Nebraska. And that's like soft confirmation that Sal is a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker who just wound up on the West Coast somehow.
I mean, I think we got a few hints to that in this episode.
maybe the like aggressive Italian American just characterization of this guy,
Right.
Sal DeLuca, famous West Coaster.
Well, we're going into today's episode with kind of a weird energy, and I'm gonna explain why.
We're having a normal one. We're having an extremely normal one.
Today we are covering season 2, episode 16, Bobby Begins Again. And Ryan and I just watched the episode. Like, we've been busy this morning we're recording this on a Friday, so we just dropped our last episode. And Ryan texted me just now being like, wow, this episode really was a miss for me.
Expose me.
And I am shocked because I thought it was a great episode. And also, the new episode of 911 aired last night, episode 14. And I wasn't crazy about it, and Ryan really liked it. So I'm just feeling like very emotionally fragile and frazzled right now.
I'll try to softball this, but I do think that the new episode of 911 was good. It's good in that season 8 way. It's not good in like a season 2 or 3 way. Three-way. But it is good for what the show is now, and so I liked it, and I thought it was well done, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. This episode that we're talking about today, I did not enjoy thoroughly, so we'll get into that in a second.
Jeez. Shall we begin discussing Bobby Begins Again?
Yes, I want to disclaim at the top that not everything in this episode was a miss for me. This episode, the reason I'm not crazy about this episode is because I've alluded to in the past my distaste for flashback episodes. And this episode is kind of the quintessential one of that for me, in that 50% of the time it's really interesting and I'm really enjoying it. And then 50% of the time it just feels like work. Like when you hear the phrase doing your show's homework for it, what that means to me more than just like, reading into things and, speculating on things that might or might not be there. And in that way, sort of building PR for the show. More so what that means for me is like the show is assigning you homework in the episode and you have to watch it in order to actually get to the parts you enjoy.
Yeah.
And so that's what 50% of this episode felt like for me. I thought that, like, overall thoughts of this episode before we jump into specifics is that I really feel like all of the stuff with Minnesota, with Bobby's guilt and his backstory and all of that feels like retreading old ground in a way that just makes me feel like we're going backwards. And it stagnates sort of, I guess, the forward momentum of the show for me. And I don't like that. It's frustrating to me. I want to enjoy the show. I want to enjoy where things are going, but I can't because it's forcing me to go backwards and re-examine this thing without any new information really coming to light.
I guess I do get that because it is like, we kind of already got a Bobby Begins episode in the form of season 1, Point of Origin. That was like before we had the Begins concept. So it's not like fully, the episode isn't exclusively focused on Bobby's past. But yeah, a lot of these things we see in this episode are kind of like re-flashbacking to the flashback we've already seen. I do get that. I guess I thought it was just overall a fun, well done episode. I liked that they actually included like several fun 911 calls, which is kind of unusual for a Begins episode. I agree that we don't necessarily get that much new insight into Bobby's character or his past, but I guess I was just like satisfied with like expanding on it and seeing more of it. Maybe I'm like less sensitive to it because this is like my 3rd or 4th rewatch of the show for one thing. So it's kind of like every episode I watch is like feels like a retread or like flashing back to something. And so maybe
Mm-hmm.
I don't notice as much when we're like kind of retreading old ground. I also,
Mm-hmm.
this is another episode directed by Jennifer Lynch. I really liked the Jennifer Lynchian touch. It had a lot of the nice things that I liked about Chimney Begins. I do think there's something kind of just like fun and fresh about seeing what the 118 was like before the current present day on the show.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There were points towards the end where I was like, I feel like we're cutting a little too much to like Bobby in church again.
Yeah.
But like other
Mm-hmm.
than that,
Very much.
it worked fine for me. So I was very interested to hear that it was a miss for you.
Yeah, everything with the 118 I thought was great. I really enjoy learning about their ecosystem before Buck showed up, before the pilot episode.
Before invasive species Evan Buckley showed up.
Exactly. And he really does show up like an invasive species in this episode.
Yeah.
He said with love. Once they got to California, I was on board. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, so you just hate Minnesota?
Well,
You're just a Minnesotan racist?
Well, for me, the Minnesota parts, they felt like, you know, when they make a live action remake of a beloved animated series. The example I used was the Netflix live action Avatar: The Last Airbender. And part of the justification is that we can expand on things that we didn't see in the original show. And so in that show, they showed, you know, the genocide of the air nomads. And it was a big like part of the marketing was that we're actually going to see sort of like the behind the scenes of what the Fire Nation was doing to these people. And I watched it and I was like, oh, maybe it was more artistic and poetic when they didn't show that, when they only showed the aftermath, and it was kind of the point. Like, I didn't need, you know, extended scenes of Bobby meeting with his old fire captain or, you know, watching his burn victim wife die in the hospital bed while the priest is saying last rites. I really didn't need all of this stuff because I could infer what had happened, and watching him carry this with him while not directly seeing everything that happened in like specifically allowed my mind to fill in the gaps on its own and made it resonate more with me. When you see Marcy getting wheeled out with burns covering her whole body and finding out that she died after their kids died, and he lied to her, you know, on her deathbed for her own sense of peace in her last moments, like to think that her kids were all right. Like that on its own in a story is like very harrowing and interesting. But I just didn't need it. I would have rather seen, you know, like we didn't get any scenes basically of Bobby giving his testimony to the investigative committee, which was the whole framing device of this episode.
True.
The entire reason he's reflecting.
It's kind of interesting that we never cut back to that framing device until the end.
Yeah, and I would have preferred it if it had gone in and out in that sense, because it would have given a broader context for why Bobby is reflecting in this way, and it would have made me feel like I'm reflecting alongside with him, as opposed to I'm being sat down in a history class and Bobby Nash is giving a lecture on here's everything I told you I did, but more and worse. Like, but not even that much worse.
Intellectually, I agree with everything you're saying. I think it all makes sense. I guess it's just like the execution worked for me enough that I wasn't bothered. But yeah, I think you're valid.
It's okay. When you said that, I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel about season 8, episode 14.
Wow. Oh my God. Well, okay. Now I think we should forgive each other because
oh my God. Virtual hug.
We understand each other. We just like viscerally don't feel the same. And that's beautiful. I can't believe I was like almost in tears talking about season 8. I think it's just like had a really weird emotional effect on me. And I don't know that I will be able to tell why until I've like had a lot more time to sit with it and rewatch it and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't think anything was like acutely wrong in my life, but maybe I'm just like not in a great headspace lately.
Do you think that was also Tim Minear's fault?
I think like spiritually, yes. Maybe he's listening to the podcast and he's mad at us and he's been like telepathically attacking us.
He like hired like a psychic to just be like, give her psychic damage, deteriorate her, drive her mad. Yellow wallpaper, yellow wallpaper.
You know, I wouldn't put it past him. But there was a thing in the episode last night. Oh, it was because they kept talking about people being stuck in season 8, episode 14, to the extent that some deranged little part of me was like, what if he's been listening to the podcast and he's fucking with us? I'm getting like the delusions, like people who think they're being gang stalked or whatever. Like,
yeah,
that's happening to me, but with Tim Minear specifically.
We should get going. So to our listeners, hi again. We had to take a break because I had to go to work.
Well, I can cut this if I want, but you were having what you described to me as a bathroom emergency, and so you had to leave a little early.
I did have a bathroom emergency. That's true.
And listen, girl, we've all been there.
We've all been there. You know, sometimes like when you gotta go, you gotta go. And you got to do what you got to do.
And Ryan already had a hard out to go to work, so we decided to do a thing that we've done before, which is pick up the recording session late at night after you get back from work. I have to work in the morning. But you know what? This is more important than my real job.
Okay, let's be honest. This is our real job.
This is our real job.
That shit we do for money, that's got nothing on the First Risk podcast, okay?
Yeah, this is the grind.
This is the grind.
We may not get paid for it, but this is the real grind.
That's just the hustle. You know what I mean? This is like our passion.
But anyway, in terms of 911, we're in a pretty good spot to continue this recording session because somehow, although we recorded for like 40 minutes this morning, we really barely got into the episode at all. So I think we should just start again from the top.
I fully agree. I think, first of all, let me just say, how on brand is that?
But to get into an hour into our recording session, to get into the events of this episode, like I said, it was directed by Jennifer Lynch. It was written by Christopher Monfett, who did Merry Xmas, the Christmas episode. He also did a few episodes in season 3, including season 3, episode 15, Eddie Begins. Womp womp.
Oh, man, that's another one that's going to really feel like work.
Yeah, and that one I think we'll have the same opinion on. But I liked this episode and I liked the Christmas episode, so I don't think it's all bad. This episode opens with Bobby in what looks to me like firefighter jail. Like, you know how in Fight or Flight we talked about Buck being in hospital jail? This looks like firefighter jail.
Ooh. I like that. This sort of liminal space that they keep firefighters in when they're deciding whether or not they can continue on this path.
When they've been naughty boys.
And they have to go in full uniform.
Yeah, he's in full uniform and he's in this cement room. It's like this little room made of cinder blocks, and we never see like who's on the other side of this shot. Like, so it does feel kind of scary and limiting.
Yeah, it's like Bobby's like Judgment Day, right? It's like he's in full uniform and he's going to like the woman speaking is like, you know, presumably on like the panel to determine Bobby's place at the 118, and the way that she's positioned out of frame, seemingly slightly above Bobby with the way that he sort of looks up when he's talking to her, it makes it feel like he's talking to God, and this is like a day of reckoning for him. Which is an interesting framing on its own, especially given how Catholic Bobby is. It makes sense why they would do that. I do think they should have shown a bit more of Bobby's testimonial in the episode. I think that would have been cool to expand on just as a frame for the episode.
It probably would have been better structured to like cut back to that throughout and maybe have that kind of prompt the flashbacks thematically. Then it would have at least felt like you had some more structure there. Because
I always love that. I love it when like someone asks a character about like their actions or their place on the show. I like that. I think that's a neat way to like take yourself out of your own place in the narrative, right? And you get to see someone else's outsider perspective, right? See the character reflect on it. So in firefighter jail, the mysterious godlike voice asks Bobby to state his name, and he says Robert Wade Nash. We're getting his full name. Very, it's a very Midwestern name. Very, very, like what a I don't want to specifically say it's a very Minnesota name because that's not my area of expertise, as you know. But it does feel like a very sort of Midwestern, all-American name. Robert Wade Nash.
Yeah, I was saying it sounds like a cowboy name to me. But Nash is an Irish name, I think.
Well, so were so many cowboys. Cut to a 911 call.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who's calling 911? Oh my God, it's Marcy, Bobby's dead wife in the past.
Yeah, she's not dead yet as she calls 911. That would be a scary... Did you ever see that Twilight Zone episode? I think it's Twilight Zone, where somebody's getting like mysterious calls and then they go to like the grave of it turns out that there's like a telephone wire stuck into somebody's grave plot. It was very spooky when I was a little kid. I don't remember if that's Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but either way,
they're already running out of ideas and they have to have another ghost call 911.
Listen, if it were up to me, I would have a ghost call 911 in every episode.
In every episode.
In every episode, Buck is like, "You're telling me a ghost called 911?"
And then title card. And then
the
credits.
title card.
No, but we are in the past. Marcy is to this point still alive and shoddy fire burning on the dance floor. Let's just say.
Yes, she is calling 911 about the apartment fire that we've all seen in Bobby's past before. And, hello, St. Paul, because we're back in the St. Paul flashback. This is what, like 2013, 2015 or something?
Around there,
It's whatever flashback we saw already in like season 1, episode 5, I think, Point of Origin, when we first saw Bobby flashbacks. Yep. And Bobby wakes up on the roof, if you'll remember, in this like past scenario. He had fallen asleep in a little like unused apartment with his little space heater. It sparked. It looked like it started a fire. It was going to start a fire, and then Bobby got like locked out of the room. So he went on the roof instead. And he wakes up on the roof, and the fire trucks are all over, down on the ground, and the building's on fire. So he rushes down. And
we get a new scene. We get a new scene of Bobby. He was rescued because obviously you saw him like the floor collapsed before he could go into his apartment. He got pulled away by firefighters.
Yeah.
And his seeming superior named a man named Phil, has him outside in front of the building as it's burning. They're bringing people outside. Bobby's panicking, of course. Marcy gets wheeled down in a stretcher. She's still alive. Horribly burned, 3rd-degree burns all over her body.
Yeah, her hair is like all singed off.
It's rough, right? It's rough.
Yeah. And you can see like around the scene, there are like other people with terrible 3rd-degree burns all over their bodies. Like this is a very terrible building fire.
Yeah. If anything, actually, I would like to make one retraction, which is that in this scene, I actually think it was really good to show sort of the human cost of Bobby's apartment fire.
It's more visceral than we have seen before.
We only really see it in the abstract before this, but now seeing the sort of the disfigured and burned victims of Bobby's actions makes it feel more real. So that is adding something. I would like to make a partial retraction in this scene specifically. I thought that was a very good...
Oh, now he likes Minnesota.
I like the people who get horribly burned and disfigured in Minnesota. The state itself is on the fence for me.
Fair enough. So Bobby catches up with his wife. He's like about to go into the ambulance with her, but then he's like, wait. He
catches up with his wife. I'm obsessed with it.
He's like, so how are you doing, girl?
Hey, Marcy, you good? Like,
yeah, what I mean is he physically catches up with his wife. Like he finds her stretcher. He's about to go in the ambulance, but then he's like, wait, my kids, like, where are my kids? And he sees his kids being like laid out on the like dead bodies area. His kids are dead. To quote Bobby, he choked them with smoke and burned their little bodies. That in itself is not funny. I'm laughing at the extremely like harrowing way the show chose to phrase that one time.
I will say their little bodies aren't that burned. I think it probably would have been maybe in poor taste.
No, it looks like they were more choked with smoke than anything.
I feel like it may have been in poor taste to show the horribly burned and disfigured bodies of small children.
No.
So that was probably a production choice.
Yeah, but it is also a bit of a retcon, to be fair.
Yeah. Peter Krause in this scene is playing the anguished parent so well. He is such a marvelous actor. I he's playing this like absolute devastation. He's like, because he's living through the absolute worst trauma a human being could go through.
Hashtag worst day ever. Am I right, guys?
Hashtag worst day ever, possibly that anyone has ever had.
I think this guy's having the worst day ever, truly.
Certainly on this show. I don't think there's been a day to rival this one yet. And so Marcy gets like shipped off in the ambulance. Phil is like, doing his best to comfort him, but obviously it's an emergency scenario. His attention is in like 1,000 places at once. So all Bobby can really do is just like, fall to the ground and just sob and wail and lament his dead children.
Well, I think he ends up going in the ambulance in the end, doesn't he? Like Phil just kind of focuses him and is like, you can't think about your kids right now. Like, just be there for your wife. So he goes, and we cut to him in the hospital, and Marcy is in one of those, sometimes with really severe burn victims, they'll put them in like behind kind of a plastic curtain so that like air can, you're really susceptible to infection when you have severe burns on a large part of your body, because like there's no protection between you and the outside air. So she's like behind this glass curtain, or not glass, like a plastic curtain. Bobby's standing there and there's a priest there. I couldn't really tell if he was doing like last rites or if he was just praying over her. But either way,
I think it was last rites, because I think the writing was pretty much on the wall that like she's pretty inoperable at this point. They're basically making her comfortable as she dies.
Yeah, maybe.
I read it as last rites.
Yeah, the priest is praying over her and suddenly she starts to wake up. So he calls in Bobby and they have a little exchange. She asks him like, where are the kids? And Bobby, it's really, his performance is really like heartbreaking. He's like, kids are fine. Everything's fine. They're safe. And Marcy heartbreakingly is like, I knew it. I knew you would come and save us. And, that can't feel good for Bobby, Yeah.
If there was anything that was going to drive someone to like the absolute worst throes of alcoholism that like a person could go through, it would definitely be this. It would definitely be like watching your wife and child die in like children, both of them die like right in front of you, and knowing that you were the inciting incident for that.
Yeah.
And just like the guilt and the shame and the grief and the trauma. Like, this man has been through so much. It really is. Like, I think it's kind of easy to forget watching the later seasons. Like, you're like, oh, well, Bobby's been doing pretty well for like, well, I mean, he's had his obstacles for sure. I just suddenly got a flash in my mind of like end of season 7 having to do CPR on Athena until she comes back to life, and then immediately having a heart attack of his own. And I was like, well, he has gone through it a little. The way you said it, he's gone through it, and my mind went right to the cartel episode.
Oh no, he like was almost killed by the cartel, and then at the beginning of that season he almost drowns in a terrible cruise ship accident.
Season 7 was really rough for Bobby.
Season 7 was kind of rough on everybody.
He had a very...
except for Buck, he just had to be bisexual. Oh, but let me finish my thought, sorry, so that's not just like a dropped thing. In general, because he hasn't like struggled with his addiction in a while, it can be easy to forget like his origins and all this stuff. But when you go back, it's like, wow, like Bobby probably does have the most intense, tragic backstory on the show.
Arguably one of the most intense, tragic backstories on any like network procedural,
any character ever.
Like, I'm reminded of that one guy on I think it was Criminal Minds, who like there was a serial killer who like murdered his entire family.
Anyhow, Marcy, after this last exchange with Bobby, Marcy starts flatlining and she's dead. So now Bobby has nothing. His family is all dead. Pretty brutal. And then we kind of go into a flashback to his family alive and well, and like Bobby making dinner. I was noticing, not that this really matters, but I was noticing in this scene, I was like, wow, his kids are so blonde.
So blonde. So
extremely blonde.
So blonde. Were they that blonde in season 1?
It feels like they're just trying to hammer home, like, you know how Minnesota has a lot of like Nordic people? Like, look at these, Viking children.
I mean, Chimney literally calls him the Viking in this episode.
He does.
They're an aggressively Scandinavian family, and
Yes.
I don't think Peter Krause has ever been blonde, and he certainly wouldn't look right blonde.
Well, that's the thing. I actually wrote in my notes, whose blonde kids are that? But I know that Marcy has blonde hair, so presumably it's just from her. It's not that important. They could be his kids, and also, like, they only appear so briefly that I don't blame them for not finding, like, the 2 carbon copy kids of Peter Krause. But yeah, it's funny that we both noticed that.
Yeah, and noticed it now. We didn't notice it in season 1. So that leads me to ask the question, is this like a color grading thing because this is sort of like a weird, like, heaven-like scene? Or is it just that, like, they got blonder?
They actually bleached those 2 child actors' hair.
Right. Did they get blonder between seasons? What happened? I think it's probably just the color grading in this season.
They put some sun in both of their hair and then made them go out on the LA streets.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I think, these kids made it big on the first season, and their parents, like, took them to all these meetings with agents on Hollywood Boulevard or something, and they're
like, you'll never make it in this town unless you get way blonder.
Everyone needs to look like Swayze, right? But Bobby is making dinner in the next scene. It's like kind of like a weird angelic flashback to, like, domestic bliss in the Nash household. This very idealized picture that they probably never quite reached. The only really scene that we saw of Bobby with his family in season 1 was when he was, like, strung out, barely keeping his eyes open while his daughter brushed her teeth, and he was tucking his kids into bed. And so this is, like, very much like an idealized family scenario.
Yeah, he's made dinner. They're passing it around, like, very nicely. And then a classic Jennifer Lynch filmmaking moment kind of transitions us into another thing. Like the scene just kind of starts to melt, and, like, the editing gets all kind of freaky, and you see Bobby questioning his surroundings. You see everything kind of start to glitch out a little.
Marcy starts, like, saying things. She starts saying, like, weird shit that's, like, very discordant with the scene itself. It sounds more like something that someone who is, like, reviving someone on the scene would say about, like, about guilt, or, like, it not being his fault or something like that.
And this transitions us into Bobby is actually being revived after, like, getting super drunk in a bar. I assume, like, alcohol poisoning or something. He's being revived by, I guess, his own fire squad, which is embarrassing. I feel for him.
Oh my God,
and, his initial reaction is to be really mad at them for bringing him back. He's like, why did you bring me back? I was right there. I was with them. Very sad sentiment for him to express.
It's perfectly setting up the whole Bobby inner conflict in season 1 where, he wants to fill out his little black book. And then once he's done making amends, he can kill himself and be with his family.
Yes, we are seeing the seeds of that for sure.
Then we go from that to this strangely beautiful handheld shot of the fire incident report ?
See, I didn't take note of it being a beautiful shot, but I'll take your word for it. It turns out, I guess the report about the apartment fire came out, and Bobby has, like, taken it with him to the bar to get drunk because he's so sad about the results of it.
I do think it's funny, like, just like in, like, a tragic sense, like, being at the bar and watching this man reading this, like, fire incident report with a beer in his hand, like he's reading, like, Anna Karenina or something.
And then you see him get so drunk that he has to be, like, have his heart stops and he has to be revived.
Literally. And so, but he isn't fired. He has a little scene with Phil in Phil's office. Phil is seemingly the fire captain or chief or whatever it is.
Well, first he's in the hospital. Bobby, like, after being revived, he's been sent to the hospital, and Phil comes in and starts talking with him about the incident report. And they end up talking about the fact that actually Bobby was cleared, but that's not what Bobby wanted. He has all this guilt. He doesn't feel like he should have been cleared. But there's this interesting exchange where he's like, am I fired? And the chief's like, no, like, whatever, like, you're an alcoholic, just go to AA and you can be a firefighter again. And when they're talking about the report, the fire chief is like, Bobby's blaming himself. He's like, it was my heater, whatever, and it caught on fire. And then the fire chief is like, yeah, and then the circuit breaker didn't trip. The water supply failed to supply water. Building alarms with dead batteries and no electrical backup. Dozens of code violations that were overlooked. So it's like, okay, building was a death trap, I guess.
This is like where I started to get frustrated, because I'm like, we know this. We were told that in the text before. So
I have a comment here that is also negative, that actually I feel like it's not bad for them to let Bobby off the hook here, because it's true that I don't want him to be literally completely directly responsible for killing those 148 people. And also, I feel like this is a bit of a cop-out on the story's part, to be like, no, Bobby, literally none of it was your fault. Like, everything that could have gone wrong with this building went wrong. It's like, I get what they're doing, but I almost feel like leaving it a little more ambiguous in the first season. Like you said, like when you leave more to the imagination, it's kind of more intriguing. And also we can imagine kind of the level of guilt and responsibility on his part that is acceptable to us. I feel like by saying that literally it was completely not his fault in a way, like other than just the very basic, like first spark from the space heater, I feel like it kind of lets him off the hook in a way that makes it less interesting, you could argue.
Yeah. Like, literally, at least part of it is his fault, right? Like say someone is in a forest and there's dead leaves everywhere, and they light a cigarette and they flick it away, and it catches on some dead leaves, and one of the sparks like ignites a fire that ends up causing an entire forest fire. Like, that person still caused a forest fire, right? Like, it doesn't matter if there were dead leaves everywhere.
In the forest, there aren't like sprinkler systems and circuit breakers and whatever, to be fair.
That is
but I know
true.
what you mean.
But like, at the same time, it's just like, it doesn't, I mean, like, it definitely does matter that the building wasn't up to code. There were so many things that like could have gone wrong that it was basically a powder keg, and like someone was eventually going to set it off. But like, that person who set it off still bears some of the responsibility, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I also have conflicting feelings about that, and I do kind of wish that they hadn't let him off the hook in that sense by having this authority figure tell Bobby, like, listen, I get you feel guilty, but you shouldn't, because like shit's fucked. And it's like, yeah, shit was fucked. It sure was.
To be fair, there is like one line from Bobby that kind of implies that he thinks maybe the reason he missed all of these fire safety issues is that he had been like high and drunk so much the past few months.
But they also told us that last season, so that's also not new information. Yes, this is all already established in the text of the show. Like,
see, that's maybe also part of the reason I didn't have the same reaction as you did, is that I have never been able to keep track of like which parts of Bobby's lore are established in the first episode about it and which ones are established here. Like, it all kind of runs together into one story for me. So yeah, I just didn't remember.
But isn't that also, sorry, I don't want to derail the conversation. Isn't that also kind of like somewhat indicative of the problem that like you have these two episodes setting up this backstory, and they tell the same story in such similar ways that you literally can't parse through what information was told in what episode and what was told in what?
Yeah, I guess.
Like in part because like they're telling the same information that they told in the first one in the second one. It's like when an artist does like a second album, and the second half of their second album is just their first album.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that I'm sorry. I don't want to make it a whole thing, but that's just why I was frustrated with the Minnesota sections of this. This is sorry.
But the chief mentions to him also, he's like, your punishment, if you're feeling guilty, your punishment is that you lived. And then he says, now make it worth a damn. So, there is that part.
Which was also the point of the first episode.
Okay, I'm not arguing against that. I'm just trying to continue describing the events of the scenes so that we can move on.
I'm sorry. Let's move on. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so then we see Bobby starts going to AA, and the scene we go to, it's actually been 6 months. He's now 6 months sober. He's kind of like giving a little speech at AA to celebrate his 6 months. He's talking about how, his sponsor kind of helped him get his faith back, talking about how like no person is God and we're all very powerless, and so that's kind of sets up why Bobby became so religious, I guess. And then afterwards, he's talking to his sponsor, who tells him that, well, Bobby is saying that he's kind of getting anxious to get back out there. Like, he's been riding the desk for the last 6 months at work. And his sponsor mentions that one of the next steps on Bobby's list of like the 12 steps is to make a list of the people you've harmed and make amends. Which this is what leads to Bobby making his little notebook with names.
We literally see his sponsor give him his little black book with a little with a little Bible verse in it or something.
Now, it's funny. This isn't a point where we're just retreading old information, but it feels more like in like those like live action Disney remakes or like a dumb like prequel or reboot of a franchise where they're like, we have to see like how this famous character got there. We have to see how Han Solo got the Millennium Falcon.
I had the same thought. It's like, this is how Chewbacca got his crossbow gun. Like,
have you ever wondered like how Elphaba got her hat or whatever? No, I guess we saw that in the
It's
musical.
my granny's. Like, I did. Okay, that is hysterical, and I'm glad we had the same thought with that.
Haven't you always wondered how Belle's mother died in Beauty and the Beast?
I do want to know if you had a similar like moment watching the scene where Bobby gives his speech at AA, because they're in like a church, right? They're in a chapel, as many AA meetings are, because many AA like services are sponsored by the church and whatnot. It's a whole thing. But the way that they framed it, so Bobby's delivering this speech, and behind him are these windows that have bars on them. And the way that it's framed, you only see the bars behind him. So for a brief moment, he was talking to his cohorts or whatever, and I thought he was in jail.
I did not notice that, honestly.
That was just like a little funny moment where I'm like, what an interesting little piece of set. This isn't even a criticism. This isn't a criticism at all. I just thought it was. I thought it was so funny that like for a brief moment I was like, Bobby fucked up so bad that like they told him that he wasn't responsible, and then they sent him to jail anyways.
They sent him to. He's attending Alcoholics Anonymous, but in prison.
In prison, right.
Well, yeah, he gets his little notebook and he meets up with his chief again, with Phil, I guess. He's talking about, like, I want to get back out there. Why have I been riding the desk? This chief is like, the St. Paul Fire Department, they don't trust you. Like, we can't really put you back out there right now because those men, like, you've made your amends and whatever, but those men are just not, they might not be ready to trust you yet. So Bobby asks to be transferred. He's like, if you can't put me in here, put me in anywhere. He literally has a line where he's like, dart in a map, coach, just put me in. Bobby is saying, put me in, coach. Where should he be sent? But Los Angeles, California, the city of angels. We get this transition to LA set to Los Angeles Blues by Peggy Lee. So it's like this big band jazz song, very stylish.
It's so good. It's so good. I like, this is like where the episode really picked up for me, and I was like, oh my god, yes, we're in LA. It's the 118. They're finally finding their replacement for Gerard, their permanent station daddy. So a question about Minnesota. Was Bobby fire captain in Minnesota, or was he just one of the teammates?
I mean, you would think he was a captain, given that he is made a captain when he transfers. Like, it seems like it would be weird to like give him a promotion in the process of this like post-scandal move. But
that was my question with it. Yeah, like, did they promote him in order to get him there? Was that the only opening in the entire country?
On the other hand, it didn't really seem like he was a captain at St. Paul, but I don't know.
The way that I'm like rationalizing it to myself, because this is literally the only way it makes sense, unless of course it's completely justifying the investigation, because I feel like then the investigation is kind of warranted. If in order to like help him like get a fresh start, they promoted him while whitewashing his entire file.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
To make it look like he was the best man for the job. The way that I'm rationalizing it to myself is that Phil wasn't the fire captain. Phil was the fire chief of like, you know, the St. Paul, Minneapolis sort of.
That is true. Because like when Bobby meets with him in his office, like he's in that outfit. He looks like he's the chief.
Yeah. And so he had the authority to transfer him to like a different state, like a completely different jurisdiction.
Yeah. I don't know if that even is like how that works.
I don't know.
I feel like various state and county and cities, fire stations, fire departments are, I don't know for sure, but it kind of seems like they're completely separate entities. Like, I don't think there's like a federal fire. Well, I'm totally talking out of my ass. I actually have no idea. There is that moment in season 4 of the show where they're like, to get a crossover with Lone Star, they're like, oh, there's a volcano exploding in Texas. I never watched Lone Star, but there's like a volcano happening. So they're like, it's so bad down there. We've got to send reinforcements from California. And I think that is a real thing that can happen. But also like, again, how would that make sense with like different cities, different states having their own separate departments?
Well, what was funny to me is that they went straight to California instead of, you know, New Mexico,
a neighboring
or
state,
Oklahoma,
no, exactly, that
or
too.
Louisiana. Like,
I always just assumed that like this volcano disaster must have been so bad that like they have to call in reinforcements from like the entire, like everyone within like a 5-state radius of Texas. Just like half of all the firefighters in the country were sent to Texas.
I mean, I guess that would, I guess, be the only justification for it. But like, I've seen clips from that episode and it definitely looks like in the clips that I've seen anyways, I'm not speaking with any sort of knowledge of the episode, but like from what I've seen, it definitely just looks like the Lone Star crew and the Mothership crew. So right. I don't know what to make of that.
It could be like, you know how some cities have sister cities? Maybe like the Austin fire department within the universe of 911 has like a sister fire department relationship with the LAFD.
Does that mean that they also have a sister relationship with Nashville and Nashville
Could
FD?
Be. We'll see how they connect those two shows.
I'm sure there is federal oversight. Is all I wanted to say. Is that like I'm sure there's
on some level,
government entities looking out for these people, if not just because they're, you know, funded by state taxes, and that can't just be in every man for themselves kind of game. Yeah, but at the 118, yes.
Yes, we cut to the 118 and Hen is going around collecting bets on how long the new captain will last, because apparently they have had a string of new captains since Gerard, and they all have ended up leaving pretty soon after. Hen even says that we're like the island of misfit toys for retiring brass. So I guess they get a lot of maybe old captains who then end up retiring. I wrote in my notes, Tommy Kennard jump scare, and he's broke.
He is broke. He wants to like what, put $10 in when they say it's 20 in and 100 payout,
and he wants to put it on credit.
By credit.
He's like, I need to go to the ATM.
It's like, who are you, man? Who are you? Stop.
Maybe everybody on this show has a bad credit score. Maybe everybody's struggling a little bit.
I do like the idea of that, because like I want to see like a scenario where they all have to like, you know, pool their like credit cards to like fund something or something, and like between them they all have like maybe $500.
Do you remember that episode of It's Always Sunny where there's that line about like, how do 3 men in their 30s not have like what, like $600 like, between them or something?
Yeah.
And they just start like,
and they're like, it's like like the economy and like Dow Jones and like the stocks. They're just like, the stocks are bad right now, man.
That's like how if you ask the men of the 118 to put their money together, I feel like that's the answer you would get. But Sal is also there.
Yes.
Sal DeLuca, who I don't know if you guys remember Sal, but he was in the Begins episodes. He's like the...
He was in Hen Begins. I actually don't think he was in Chimney Begins.
Oh, really? Yeah, then maybe there's just some... Maybe he was like on leave during that time. Sal is there. He says that this new captain's from Nebraska. Chimney corrects him. He says he's from Minnesota. And Sal says, quote, "There's New York, there's LA, and in between there's Nebraska." So he's one of these coastal elites.
And Hen says that Chicago's going to kick his ass. Go Hen.
Which they will.
They will. They absolutely will. But Sal literally gives Bobby a week. Sal gives Bobby a week. He has no faith in this guy. And as they're talking and as Sal is like bad-mouthing him, who should pop out of the 118 ladder truck or whatever but Mr. Bobby Nash himself? Right?
This is such a little diva moment for him.
It is, because Sal's talking about, like, you know, they pulled him out of some podunk town. Sorry, Jane.
St. Paul is a major metropolitan area for all of you who are listening out there.
Yes. It has a wonderful airport. The Prince store is very delightful. He says, like, something about, like, you know, they plucked him out of some podunk town and they're running out of training wheels. And Bobby pops out and he says, "You're actually already out of half the stuff you're supposed to have in this truck." He was just in there doing inventory. It's like, oh, this guy, you know, he didn't come to play. He came to slay.
I don't think he was doing inventory. I think he was like sitting there, like hiding, like crouched down, just waiting for them to say something bad about him so that he could pop out and do this little diva moment.
I like the idea of that.
It's very like in the previous episode where the 118 all like waited inside the trucks to all like come out in sequence to confront Marty.
That's true. I like that they did that trick in 2 episodes back to back. And then I like that also implies that they learned that trick from Bobby specifically.
Bobby. Oh, his theatricality. It rubbed off on them.
His influence.
I have a mean note here, which is, I know we have been speaking way too much on Tommy. I want to get his name out of our mouths, but I have to say, Lou Ferrigno Jr.'s like non-acting in this scene was making me laugh.
My God.
He just has this like blank, dead, sort of bewildered face throughout the entire scene, like regardless of whatever emotion he's supposed to be expressing. And I don't think that's necessarily always true of him, but I do think it is often true of him. And I thought in this scene especially, I kind of couldn't tear my eyes away from that. I mean, his expressions are not the most natural, I would say. And let's leave it at that.
Is it too soon to call him the Gal Gadot of 911?
Okay.
Is that too mean? That too mean?
I don't know. Well, the other thing I wanted to say is that the character of Sal seems like he's supposed to be from New York. Like his name is Sal DeLuca, and he kind of speaks with this New York accent. And even his comment about like there's LA and there's New York. Like, I think he says New York first. And I don't know, you get the sense later Chimney calls him like Fredo, which could just be a reference to him being Italian American. But I felt like he's supposed to be, I feel like we're supposed to interpret him as being from New York.
No, I agree. I mean, it's like the one nice thing you'll ever hear someone living in LA say about New York. So I would pretty much take that as confirmation. I just like the idea that like Sal grew up in New York, or like maybe even like Jersey, like Newark or something, and like he found his way out to the West Coast through some sort of like Evan Buckleyan trial of errors, you know.
Speaking of comparing Sal to like a much more fan favorited character, I feel like I've heard whispers over the years of people shipping Sal and Tommy. Have you heard any whispers of this?
I haven't heard whispers of that, in part because I don't think I've ever heard the fandom talk about Sal once.
No, I don't even remember where I heard of this, but I feel like at some point, maybe it was even just like while looking for fan fiction, I like saw that as a relationship in a fic or in, you know, the filters or something. But I think that's a thing. It's becoming a thing.
It's becoming a thing. What would you call that? Sami. Oh my God!
Salmi.
Wait, it would
like
literally
salmon.
It would literally be salami. It would literally be salami.
Oh, guys, it's kind of
cute.
cute.
It's salami.
That's so cringe. Arguably not the worst ship name we've ever come up with, but certainly not the best.
It certainly feels the grossest to say.
I don't like comparing ships to lunch meats at all.
I don't either, especially when there are appendages involved. But that does feel like a very like fandom thing to just see two like conventionally attractive white men in a scene together and be like, they should fuck.
Just two like giant white men and being like, these two have chemistry. Yes. Okay. 117 works in Sal DeLuca x Tommy Kennard. I've been looking for it on AO3 this entire time.
What? Oh my God. 117 works. I hope to God.
There are actually 160 when you click on the ship.
I hope to God those are like group scenes and they don't like focus on them with any sort of narrative weight, because otherwise,
I mean, 160, I don't think they're all going to be group scenes. And the first fic is from 2019, but then the second one is from 2024. So I think this must be mostly a recent phenomenon.
What? Guys!
Here's my guess, okay? I'm about to psychoanalyze this. So Tommy came back and became explicitly gay. He had been kind of hinted at being gay before, but then only in season 7 was it confirmed. Was he like canonically being gay with another man? I wonder if some people who maybe shipped Buddy and didn't want to ship Tommy with Buck, but saw like another gay man character on the horizon, decided to ship him with Sal. Or maybe people who, you know, there are those people who like got really into Buck Tommy and then when they like broke up, got really bitter about it and decided to be like not fans of the show, but fans of like Lou Ferrigno Jr. specifically. Maybe like that type of fan is into something like this.
I must say the strangest contingent of the fandom, because like I've never seen that on this show with literally any other character. Like imagine if after like it was revealed in like the first episode of season 7 that like Buck and Natalia broke up, like everyone was like, oh my God.
Yeah. A whole subculture of Natalia fans break off. This is why misogyny is real, because this would never have happened for one of Buck's female love interests.
Ever. The only love interest I could possibly see this happening for is maybe Ana Flores, just because everyone is in such agreements about how Eddie fumbled her. Just receding from like the show itself, just out of like secondhand embarrassment for Eddie. So I could maybe see that. I could not see this for literally any other romantic partner other than Tommy Kennard.
Okay, I just found one of the fan fictions refers to them as salami. Yay!
Oh, we can't have an original thought on this pod.
Oh my God, one of them saying happy day 4 of salami week. How is this popular enough that they were doing like themed weeks with fan fiction drops? That's like you need a rather substantial chunk of fans to do that kind of thing.
No, honestly, wait, I'm kind of on their side now. I
am too.
You know, I love a rare pair. I'm happy to quarantine these boys with each other.
You know, our problem was like, we don't like that Tommy is like racist and weird. Like, we don't want him with one of our cool, woke main characters. But listen, both Sal and Tommy were racist and sexist and weird. So if you put them together, that's really kind of just sparing everybody from having to deal with them. It's kind of a match made in heaven.
Agreed. Quarantine them with each other. You know, let them eat each other out. Meanwhile, everyone else is over here having fun in a different part of the world. I'm okay with that. And honestly, as a rare pair, a fan and writer myself, I respect this. And I think that if that is what sparks joy for you, I have questions. But I ultimately do support it.
We need to get back on track. I'm so sorry. I'll cut out most of this. So yeah, I did write in my notes in relation to what Bobby does in this scene. I did write Bobby if he's slayed.
Hey.
So I really liked this. And then Chimney has his line where he says, I've got 20 on the Viking.
Jane, can that please be the title of this episode? Bobby if he's slayed.
Bobby if he's slayed. Yeah,
because
that's great.
It's a double meaning thing too. So I think that's fantastic.
So true.
But then we get my favorite My favorite needle drop of the entire episode, in part, possibly one of my favorite needle drops in the entire show so far, is the alarm goes off and they gear up into the trucks, and it's Bobby's first day on the job, and what song should be playing but Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath. I am over the moon.
Yeah, we cut from the 118 station scene to basically 3 different 911 calls happening. We get just little snippets of what each caller is saying. The first one is saying, the palm tree's eating him alive. The second one is saying, her head's swelling up like a melon. And the third one is saying, it's Maurice, he's gone crazy. So the first one we see is that we've got a palm tree trimmer who's gotten stuck in the fronds, and according to Chimney, this is like a regular occurrence, and all of these calls are supposed to be showing Bobby like how different the calls out here are, because of course you would never in Minnesota find somebody who's stuck in a palm tree. You would have to like fish a guy out of a frozen lake, or maybe somebody's caught in a fir tree. Something like that. Maybe somebody's being eaten by a coyote or a mountain lion.
I love the little, first of all, the little snippets are fun because you get to see like the team dynamics. Sal is very hot-headed and he tends to sort of go ahead with things.
Yeah, he's sort of taking charge as if he's the captain.
Yeah, bucking orders, if you will. You get to see little moments in between the calls when they're like driving to other calls. And Bobby is just completely out of his element. LA is completely unnavigable for him. He has a map and he says he needs a decoder ring to get around because like who would design a city like this?
I wrote in my notes, this is like, we're well into the 2010s at this point. Like, don't the trucks have digital GPS, or shouldn't someone?
But Bobby's so old school. Maybe they only use paper maps in Minnesota. Do you guys have GPS in Minnesota?
Yes. It's fair to assume that maybe he's like following along with the paper map to like try and orient himself in the city, but he's like actually like giving directions to the driver. So it's like, that seems odd, but whatever. Yeah. We see the head swelling up like a melon scene is this woman is getting like her hair done, and she's got her head in one of those hair, like, over the head hair dryers at a hair salon. And she's having some kind of allergic reaction to something they put in the hair dye. And so her head, the prosthetic on her is crazy. Her head is like the size of a beach ball. We find out she's an actress. She's like, am I going to be okay to like go to my audition tonight? And they're like, probably not. But that's like another example of like an LA call, It's the most LA call you could possibly think of. An actress is getting her hair done at a holistic hair salon with all organic products because she has a big audition in like a couple hours or something. Which like organic hair care products read untested, not approved by the FDA. Sorry.
Yeah, let's have that conversation. And obviously, this like hippie lady who runs the salon is like, we use organic products and everything, even our cleaning supplies. And it's like, so how about a cheat sheet for like ingredients? So if anyone has an allergic reaction because you put like I don't know, sesame oil or something in your
scorpion venom
detergent, just literal scorpion venom. Like, I guess that is organic.
There's a funny line from Hen towards the end of that one where she's like, I don't think she's getting that part.
My favorite moment of this entire montage, Bobby, in his Midwestern naivete, says, hey, let's take the freeway. It'll take us there faster. First of all, this was very obviously written by someone from the West Coast because they called it a freeway instead of like a highway, or I guess in the East Coast people call it like a turnpike or something like that.
Oh, we call it a freeway in Minnesota, so
that
checks out. I mean, we say highway or freeway.
That's what we did in Washington too. But like when I like first moved to New York, everyone was like, I can so tell you're from the West Coast because you called it a freeway. I'm like, great.
That's just weird. I feel like that's just like maybe exclusively a New York thing, because I feel like they were lying about that being just a West Coast thing.
That's probably true. I think it's one of those things where like people who live in the Northeast forget that an entire world is outside of the Northeast.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, I like how many fun 911 calls they managed to fit into this episode, because that's obviously kind of uncommon for a Begins episode. They usually are not as big on like the funny 911 calls, and this one has this really fun montage where we get a bunch of them. Finally, it's the evening, and the 118 arrives at the Maurice call, the one where the guy on the phone was like, it's Maurice, he's gone crazy. And so they pull up to what they've been told is a stabbing. And actually,
it's this guy's like little like farmhouse backyard or something, and they start to check out this guy, and it's like, it doesn't really look like he has that deep stab wounds. It's more like slashing. And who should round the corner but a goddamn chicken?
Turns out this was actually a cockfighting accident. One of the roosters has been fitted with a blade on its leg, and he's gone rogue. His name is Maurice. And as soon as they figure out it's a chicken and they start trying to wrangle this chicken, this like campy like instrumental country banjo music starts playing. It's very goofy.
Hen chastises him.
Hen is appalled by this, and the guy is like, you must be one of those animal rights types. And Chimney's like, well, her name is Hen, which is a great joke. They've been sitting on that one.
They were sitting on that one. It's so good. And we learn in this scene definitively that the reason why Tommy and Buck's relationship was so sexless is because Tommy is afraid of cock.
No comment. Let's move on.
The chicken is Sal tries to like go and grab the chicken, and he tries to get Tommy to like help, and Tommy is like running for his life. Like this bird is freaking him out.
Tommy's freaked out by the chicken. Sal has a very baffling line where he says, "What, are you gonna kiss him?" Yeah. And I was like, I assume that was also meant to be like a "you're gay" joke. I'm not sure what he meant by that though.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Like, what, you're gay for chickens?
What was the setup there? I genuinely have no idea. But Bobby, this is finally a little slice of home for him, I guess, because he is just laughing.
Bobby just starts laughing in delight. And, he's watching these like baffled LA firefighters try and handle something like as simple as a chicken that's out of control. I don't know what the 118 like thought their plan was, as they're just like kind of crowding this chicken that has this very clearly very dangerous blade on it. So Bobby finally, he sees a blankie nearby. He grabs the blankie, and he just he waits for the chicken to like jump up onto something, like sitting on something, and he just like wraps a little blankie around it and grabs it.
So sweet.
He takes the blade off its leg.
He's got a father's touch. He's got, dare I say, a farmer's touch.
A farmersonly.com, romancing the uniform, and farmersonly.com meet in one man, Bobby Nash.
My goodness.
He's holding that chicken and just radiating, calming energy. And he says, West Coast meet Midwest. And all the Midwesterners in the audience go, yes!
And who should roll up? Who should roll up but one Athena Grant? Meet cute.
Athena's first meeting. Meet cute. And it is cute.
It is cute.
Athena shows up. She's like, I heard there was a stabbing or something. And she's like, where's the assailant? And Bobby's like, here he is.
And hands her the chicken. And she is very not into this. She's like, no.
Yeah,
and he's
no way. But he just hands her the rooster and leaves. I thought this was hot, and I can't really explain why, but it was. And so I think the episode succeeded on this front. Very nice, Athena meet cute.
Yes, and it's all we needed really of their little meet cute. It was very sweet. But after that, the day finally comes to an end. It's Bobby's first shift with the 118. It comes to a close, and we see him in his car. Talking to Oscar, his sponsor from Minnesota, on the phone. And
Bobby is saying that he's about to go to an AA meeting. And, his sponsor's like, great. They touch base, they get off the phone, and Bobby walks into the building he's been observing. We sort of pan up, and we see that it's actually a bar. It's a bar called Dirty Tim's.
Dirty Tim's.
Did they name it after Tim Minear?
That would be very funny, and I don't have like a counter explanation, so I'm just gonna say yeah. Then so he goes in. The way that it's framed is really interesting because like you see him like watching from his car. People are outside, and like you think it's like people like having a smoke, chatting outside of the AA meeting before they all go in. They all know each other, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people like do that. I've never been to one yet. Knock on wood. Hope my life doesn't take that drastic turn. Then like it is subtly like panned up, like you said, and it's a good reveal. It's good Jennifer Lynch classic filmmaking style of like
Right.
using visual storytelling. In my network procedural, no way. But then we go from there to the next day. Bobby is back in the pews. Bobby's back in the pews, and we finally get a straight priest on this show. Finally, after all this time, a heterosexual member of the cloth.
Bobby goes to his LA church, seemingly for the first time. And yes, the priest comes out of confessional with someone else, and it's not hot gay priest. It's an older, presumably straight, not trying to say he's like bad looking, but not quite as obviously hot priest.
Just like a statistically probably straight priest. We can say that, sure.
It's really kind of problematic of us to just assume that this older man priest couldn't be gay also.
It's not that he can't be, it's just that he probably isn't.
For all we know, this could be like a gays only church.
Well, that would explain why Bobby Nash is there. But then they're talking, and Bobby is like saying that you'll have to forgive me if I am a little I've haven't been here in a minute, right? And he reveals that he relapsed. It's been almost a year since he's been sober. In fact, it's been a year to the day, right? He relapsed on his anniversary.
Yeah,
and that's not great.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing where the priest is like, did you have a bad day? And Bobby's like, no, actually I had a good day. And the priest is like, oh, and you think you're not allowed to have those, right? Like it's implied that Bobby was kind of relapsing as a way of punishing himself because he spent this whole day like doing good work with good people and kind of forgot about his thing he's been constantly grieving, and he felt the need to punish himself for that. Not to make everything about Eddie Diaz, but I did think it was interesting the way this conversation between Bobby and the priest really mirrors the conversation Eddie and hot gay priest have in season 8 about Eddie denying himself joy. Like it's actually a very similar conversation about both Bobby and Eddie feeling like they don't deserve to have nice things or to be happy, and so they punish themselves.
Not to make this about me, but I just know that if I was this priest and I had just gotten out of like a confessional that ran long, and like this guy like sat me down and started like unloading on me, I would just be like, ugh, like we just met. You're not even gonna like be like, hey, how's how's finances or something. I don't know. Whatever priests worry about.
How do you think priests take like their lunch break? Like, it seems like they don't really have an official way to be like, I'm clocking in for my break. Like, sorry, I've been doing constant, like, if you're getting constant confessionals as a priest in a busy LA church, when do you get a chance to be like, sorry, like I can't do this right now. I've got to like go eat a sandwich for a half hour and then I'll be back. It just makes you wonder.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. I do wonder if priests have to...
If priests eat?
Like, what do they do to decompress? You know what I mean? Because, like, therapists go to other therapists, right? Like, when you're a therapist, like, most therapists have their own therapist. This is just a truth of the trade, right? And most therapists, I would argue all therapists should have therapists. I would argue most people should have therapists, but it's not subsidized, so they don't. And also there's a stigma around it. But like, do priests ever go to other priests and they're like, you wouldn't believe the day I had?
I hope so.
But he says to Bobby, because Bobby is like he's trying to like deal with all this shit while bearing this great burden, and he says there's only been one person who is good at multitasking from across. And it's like, listen, I get that you're like Catholic, this is your whole life, but like, does everything have to be about Jesus?
Maybe he wasn't sure how to respond to this extremely like depressing story of Bobby's life, and he was just like, let me bring it back to like common ground, easy, familiar territory.
Basically, like, the whole point of that scene is like, hey, Bobby's struggling. He relapsed. Let's establish a connection with the faith in California. And so from there, we go to this family.
We cut to a family restaurant called Guillermo's. It's the owner of the restaurant, who's like a middle-aged guy, his teenage son, and his wife are all at the restaurant. It's a family-owned place. They're all kind of there a lot. It seems like the wife is like in the back doing the bookkeeping, and we find out that the restaurant is doing badly. In fact, this reminded me a lot of the kind of place you see on Kitchen Nightmares, where it's like a family-owned Italian restaurant, and nobody eats there.
Okay.
They're in terrible financial trouble.
Can I just say, first of all, this is hitting way too close to home because literally every restaurant in New York is doing really bad right now. And I work in restaurants, and my restaurant is family owned. So I was like watching this. I'm like, I don't need to be reminded of this. But I do have a question.
Hey, if Raul Esparza is still coming in, then it can't be doing that bad.
That's true. That's true. I do have a question, which is, so the restaurant is called Guillermo's, and we hear the man referred to as Guillermo by everyone except for his wife, who calls him Victor, right? So what is this guy's name?
Wow, I guess I did not really clock that. I think in my notes I just referred to him as Dad.
Which is what the son calls him.
Not like my dad.
That's true. That is what... It's like, oh my god, Dad, you're on TV. No, like, I want to know what this guy's name is. I want to look up the credits right now, actually, because I kind of have to know.
Maybe his last name is Guillermo, and that's like, some people call him by his last name.
He's not credited as Guillermo, he's credited as Victor. But then when Bobby saves him...
Let's not worry about it.
No, I have to worry about it, because plot hole ding.
I need us to pick up the pace a little bit, because I need to go to bed.
Okay. All I'm saying is I don't know what this guy's name is, and neither does the show. So let's move on.
Fair enough.
But...
So Guillermo and/or Victor is tending to the very few customers in the place. He actually tells his wife and son that they can go home because, you know, there aren't really any customers. You know, his wife is like, "Are you sure you can handle it?" And he's like, "What, you think I can't handle the dinner rush?" And he says this sarcastically because there's nobody in the place. And once his wife and son leave, he goes over to like this one straggler who's in the corner, like treating it like it's like a cafe. Like he's like writing in a notebook and has headphones in, and he's apparently nursing like one cup of coffee that he's ordered. So the dad comes over and he's like, "Hey, can I like get you any food? Because you're in a restaurant." And the guy's like, why would I want to order any food? And the guy's like, well, you're in a restaurant. And the guy gets up and he's like, "Fine, I'll take my business elsewhere." And of course the owner's like, "What business?" I
just want to say I deal with this every single day. Every single day I have one person who comes in and is like, "Oh, can I just have like, can I get a table, but can I just have like one drink or one tea or whatever?" And I'm just like, you have to buy something. You have to get food. This is a restaurant. If you want a table, you need food. If you want a drink, you can sit at the bar. If you want a table, you need to get food. I can't. Entitlement of like service workers is just like absolutely insane. Like just feeling entitled to
it is, because it's like if you're asking someone to wait on you, that's like somebody who's working for tips, and you can't really, it's not really fair to take up a whole table if you're just going to get something that will not result in a substantial tip. It is messed up that it works that way in the US, but that's the way it is for right now.
That's the way it is. That's the way it is. Sorry about it.
And it is like, like there are cafes that exist for this purpose where you can just get a drink and sit there all day on your laptop or whatever, writing your novel. But it was so funny to me that like, why would this guy do that in like a family-owned sit-down Italian restaurant? How is that the atmosphere for that kind of thing?
I guess because all the cafes close at like 6 or whatever. So this is like that ship has sailed.
But like 24-hour cafes are like a thing. Or you can even go to like a diner would make more sense for something like this.
Yeah, a diner would make way more sense, but maybe he's just like, I really need the red and white checkerboard like placemat. Just it's really important for my process.
I'm writing my screenplay about Italian American Americana, and I really like the atmosphere in here for putting me in the mood of my world.
If I don't go to a restaurant, how is anyone going to see me write? You know?
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Freddie, you know, like the mom tells Freddie that like he has to get his laptop and go. He's like, "Can I finish this first?"
Freddie is the son. We haven't said that.
Freddie's the son, and Freddie's going to come back in a big way. So just remember him. But yeah, so he's like, "What business?" And then
speaking of guys who came back in a big way, Easter.
Hello, JC.
Sorry, go
what
on.
Up? But he basically kicks the guy out because he's not going to buy anything, and then he's like, "I'm taking my business elsewhere." Like you said, he goes like, "What business?" And then 911 call. The restaurant's on fire.
The restaurant's on fire. And what's more, the mom is the one who called 911, and she says, "I think my son's in there."
By the way, anyone with eyes can see what happened. I just want to say,
yeah,
the writing is so clear. But yeah, the restaurant's on fire.
The 118 pulls up, the restaurant's on fire. Somebody says the sprinklers didn't come on, so that's kind of a clue of like something suspicious is going on here.
And also a weird little flashback moment for Bobby, kind of, because it's like, oh, just like my building where my kids died. Right.
True. He gets in the burning building and he kind of freaks out. But I was also going to say, it's weird that, like, I guess there were no cooks at this restaurant. Like, even at a failing family business of a restaurant, in this big of a restaurant, like, you usually have, like, some people cooking the food. Like, was the dad cooking every meal? Mm-hmm. That seemed odd. But I guess all the cooks were sent home too, maybe off screen.
Maybe they can't even afford to hire like waiters and bussers because it's like in that dire of straits.
I was gonna say, like, I can buy him being the one like service person out there, but I don't really buy him being that and being also cooking all the food. But anyway, I guess the dad was the only person there. But one other thing that happens when the 118 gets there is, before really waiting for Bobby's approval, Sal just like goes into the restaurant. He's like, I've got to go find that kid. I'm going to go into this blazing building. And Bobby clearly doesn't approve. Like, he did this without authorization. So that's when Bobby goes in and he gets kind of triggered by this inferno. Yeah. He starts flashing back to the apartment, but he finds the dad. He finds Victor and/or Guillermo, and he rescues him. And something we hear as they're arriving is that there's flashover risk inside the building, which I had to look up. It is, quote, the near simultaneous ignition of all combustible material within an enclosed area. So I guess depending on like the ventilation, some fires could have a bigger risk for that. And so suddenly, as he's rescuing the dad, this happens, a flashover happens, like the whole ceiling ignites. But somebody tells Bobby there's like a skylight he can punch out to get ventilation. So he does that. The fire kind of gets under control and they get out.
Can I just say, the sauce in this scene, it looks expensive. The sound design is fantastic. The fire is just like, it's a really impressive effect. Jennifer Lynch, you ate this scene up. Like a fire, like I don't know how expensive it is to do burning building scenes. I assume that's why they don't fight more fires on the show. But like when they do it, it looks so expensive. It looks so good. Like they're really putting resources into it, and I felt that in this scene, dude. This was so good.
Bobby gets out of there and he's like, where's Sal? Like, he thinks he's gonna have to go back in to rescue this guy who went in without asking in the first place. Suddenly DeLuca comes back out and he's got the kid. Like, he's successfully rescued the kid, but Bobby is still upset about this. He's like, why would you do that without asking? And of course we go back to the station, and DeLuca and Tommy are both a couple of the year. Sal and Tommy are leaving together because they're in love. Yeah. And Bobby stops them and he's like, wants to talk to Sal, and Sal kind of just starts yelling at Bobby. They really get into it.
Yeah, Sal is like being like completely insubordinate. He's insulting Bobby, and like he's like very clearly got this like chip on his shoulder because like he got passed over for the promotion in favor of this new guy.
Which, like, in what world was Sal getting the promotion? We have no reason to...
He has no leadership qualities. He's just like an egomaniac with a hero complex. And so he just rushes in.
No, he shows in this scene that he has both a huge ego and a hero complex. He feels no remorse for, like, going into the blaze without asking.
Chimney even attempts to, like, de-escalate.
Yeah, he calls Bobby a jackhole. Which I guess is maybe like the show's attempt to combine jackass and asshole without having to censor themselves.
But they say ass on this show, don't they? Like they can, like,
I think jackass would have been fair game, but instead it seems like they wanted to say asshole and couldn't, so they said jackhole. But that's weird. It sounds like a jackalope or something.
Maybe what they wanted to say was hashtag pussies. Maybe that's what they were actually going for. Right.
Right. They probably did want to say that. And he also calls Bobby a mook.
A mook.
When I first heard that, I had to look it up to make sure it wasn't some, like, obscure 1940s racial slur. But it's not. It's just an obscure 1940s general derogatory term. It just means, like, a stupid person.
If you needed any more evidence that this guy is, like, the most, like, blatant, like, sort of New York Italian American, like, stereotype you could think
exactly.
of.
I wrote at this point, I think he might have traveled here from 1930s New York. Like, this guy, he might as well just be like a gangster, an Untouchables style gangster or something.
I think it's sadder than that. I think he's like a Tony Soprano style, like, 80s or 90s, like, gangster, like desperately clinging to, like, the glory of, like, The Godfather or whatever.
Damn.
When really, like, that era is over, and that's, like, the whole tragedy of it. That this whole thing is just, like, sad. Bobby, for his part, just is having absolutely none of this, so he just completely fires Sal's ass. He fires his ass right then and there in front of everyone, humiliating him.
It's kind of funny. He, like, threatens to fire him. He's like, if that's how you want to be, like, then walk out of here and don't come back or something. And then Sal starts to walk out of there, and then Bobby's like, okay, like, you're fired. And Sal's like, really? Like, it's like, what did you think was gonna happen?
That's what he said. That's what he said was gonna happen. I'm sorry, bro. Like,
I wrote in my notes, Tommy just standing there, even he was weirded the fuck out. There's something about, again, he's got that, like, blank expression on his face that he always has, and he's just standing there in the background of this scene.
Yeah. And so Sal saunters off, just defeated, just humiliated. Right. And his ego has been absolutely smashed to smithereens, and thank God for that. And so upstairs, a little while later, we see Bobby in his little book writing down Guillermo, curiously, as the first name in his book. As the first name in his book.
Yeah, they really just didn't have this sorted out when they made the episode.
They really didn't, and it tickles me. It really tickles me. I'm not gonna lie. The actor being credited as Victor is just the cherry on top. But Hen walks in fearful because they suddenly realize that Bobby is not fucking around. Bobby is, takes his authority very seriously. So Hen walks in. She makes a light, attempt at conversation, like, what's that book you're writing? And he closes it right away, immediately.
Well, there's this moment where Bobby's like, who's responsible for polishing the pipes on the fire truck? Do you make a probie do it? And Hen's like, no, sir, I did it. And was it not up to your expectations? And Bobby does that cutesy fake out thing where he's like, no, it didn't meet my expectations. Really long pause. It exceeded them. And it's like, bro, you can't do that after you just fired somebody in front of everyone. No. There's no reason for that.
You see, like, this burden like fall off of her for a moment, and she's like, oh my god, I'm not next.
But they start talking. Bobby Hen kind of tells Bobby for the first time that she prefers to be called Hen. She says that Chimney prefers to be called Chimney. Bobby asks why this is, and Hen says, you should ask him. So still no insight there.
Plot hole ding again. I'm sorry to go all CinemaSins on this, but Chimney got his nickname in between Hen Begins, when he was still called Howie, and Bobby Begins again when he's now called Chimney, right? And so Tommy was working there while he got his nickname, so he presumably knows why he's called Chimney and called him
Mm-hmm.
Chimney while he was working there. So why, when Chimney was calling Tommy at the 217, did he say, Tommy,
Mm-hmm.
it's Howie? Plot hole ding.
Maybe Chimney's real close friends, like Hen, called him Chimney at the time, but his like workplace racist acquaintances, like Tommy, were still not on that level with him.
I mean, that's probably true. That's probably true. And that's a good headcanon that explains it.
But you're right, it's inconsistent.
I think the truer answer is that they didn't make the decision to have him be called Chimney in the flashbacks until they were writing this episode.
Probably
because
true.
they wrote that one before this.
Probably true. So anyway, Hen reveals to Bobby that she thinks he shouldn't have fired Sal.
Mhm.
Like, you know, he should have gotten another chance. And Bobby says, you know, I would have given him another chance, but he clearly didn't want one from me. But then he reveals that he actually just suspended Sal and transferred him to another station. He says he really does try to be fair.
I don't know why I had it in my memory that Sal died in this episode. I thought that's why we never saw him again and why he was only in the flashbacks. But I do like this moment of Bobby being like firm but fair, because like as much as Sal was the problem child of this new sort of team composition, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's fair that like a extended moment of insubordination is probably more indicative of an issue that can be sorted out rather than being a full stop fireable offense. Your career's over, no pension for you, buddy, bye bye.
Yeah.
You know, I like that moment of characterization for Bobby, and it's like a good foundation for his friendship with Hen, as this scene lays the groundwork for. So I like it a lot.
Yeah.
And Hen, of course, seeing this and recognizing his humanity in this moment, invites him out for drinks with Chim and Tommy.
Yeah, she says she and the boys are going out for drinks later. So she invites him. And we then see Hen, Chimney, and Tommy are all out for drinks together. Not sure why they invited Tommy. No, I think to give 1 ounce of fairness to the Tommy lovers, it is true that the show makes it seem like they have made amends with Hen and Chimney. From our perspective, does he deserve that grace? Not necessarily after
Not
everything.
necessarily.
But they have clearly, it does make sense. Like sometimes when you're working with somebody, even if you've had some rather substantial differences, it's like you can't just be their enemy forever if you want to have like a tolerable work experience. So presumably they're trying to include each other in things.
Yeah, and if Chimney and Hen are, you know, willing to forgive Tommy his past transgressions, far be it from me to stand in the way of that. I just thought it was kind of funny to see them be friends when, after Tommy left the 118, that friendship did not continue in any meaningful way.
And that kind of strengthens the idea that, like, they were probably all being cordial with each other because it's more tolerable to work with people that you are friendly with than to, like, actively keep being hostile. But yeah, maybe it wasn't like a real deep friendship.
This is co-workers drinks. This is not like this is not like a best friends drinks. And in fact, I actually like the idea that, like, you know, like they hang out as a group, but secretly Chim and Hen are the ones that really confide in each other, and Tommy's just like the straggler, like in the first season of Vampire Diaries with like Elena and Bonnie, and then like Caroline's just like there.
Well, Chimney ends up asking what a mook is, and who should walk in but Bobby Nash to explain that it means a stupid person. And he's like, I Googled it. And then Bobby does this very like theater kid thing where he like pulls up a backwards chair and sits down on it. I thought that was very dramatic of him. Very like theater, not even theater kid. It's very like theater, high school theater teacher kind of vibes.
That's exactly what it is. It's like in that episode of Family Guy where they're doing like that chastity group is like talking to the school, and like the guy like pulls up, the youth pastor like pulls up like a metal folding chair, sits backward, and is like, let's rap for a minute.
And Bobby orders a club soda and also pays for everyone's drinks. So He's endeared himself to them.
Buys their love. Love to see it. That is the way to do it. Good for him.
Yep.
And then in a very strange, fun moment, they start going burn for burn.
Well, can we say how this starts? Is Tommy has a line where he says, "Single is easier. Having the scars impresses women. Getting them freaks them out." I wrote, "Sure, Jan."
Sure, Jan.
I'm sure you have many opportunities in your life to impress women. I'm sure they're all very impressed. I'm sure you have this problem all the time with your committed relationship girlfriend that you don't like or love.
And I'm sure that specifically is what freaks the women out is Tommy's burns and not the fact that he isn't actually attracted to any of them.
Maybe it's like the way he copes with it mentally as he tells himself, he's like, "No, it's my scars. It's my physical imperfections."
Like he's the Joker. Like he's like, "Do you want to know how I got these scars?" Like
Anyhow, everybody starts going around and sharing their scars. Hen shows off a big one on her leg. She's like, "This is from that fire we fought last year," or whatever. Bobby ends up showing a scar on his back. He's like, "This is from this electrical fire I was at." And then finally Chimney says he's unscarred and plans to stay that way. LOL. Ironic foreshadowing, whatever, dramatic irony.
And within 2 minutes of showing up, Bobby, like reflecting on that electrical fire, gets a hunch and opens the tab, leaves his card like with the bartender or something, and leaves. Right?
Yeah.
Like he just leaves. He just ducks. He's like, "This has been great." And then he goes, as anyone would, to the place of his most recent call where the restaurant has burned down and starts investigating like the fuse box. Right?
Yeah. And who should show up but Athena? She's like, "Put your hands up." And it's like, "Oh, it's just you." Athena moment.
The cuffs will come later.
And they're like flirting. It's cute.
It's very cute.
Turns out they both had a hunch about this. They both had a little thought in the back of their mind that something wasn't adding up. So they both decided to return to the scene of the accident.
Athena's mind went to the sprinkler system, which didn't go off. And so she went around back and found that the water valve had been manually shut off. Bobby, meanwhile, found that the fuse box was entirely intact, which means that it wasn't an electrical fire. And they pieced together the obvious conclusion that this was not a freak accident. This was someone purposefully orchestrating a fire to take place in their restaurant, who should have the only motive to do so, but the restaurant owner struggling financially. It's like when homicide detectives finally figured out that like the most likely person to murder someone was their spouse. Right.
Yeah, no, it is. Come to think of it, it's funny that they did this whole thing of like, we're going to return to the scene of the crime and do all this detective work, when like probably even if they hadn't done that, like a couple months down the road when they're like doing the insurance investigation, probably this would have come to light anyway.
Yeah, because it's a very sloppily like put together. It's not like a masterminded like idea. Like this just seems like it was like an impulse the guy had, right?
No, yeah, it does seem like maybe it was a spur of the moment thing.
And Athena like figures out, right? Athena like figures out like she sees like the footprints going on, and Bobby traces it back to where he found the guy. And that turns out to be the source of the fire, right? It seems to be where the fire is the most intense. And they're like, how did he know where his son is in the burning building? And of course the guy first checks where the fire is most intense because he knows, right, all the pieces are fitting together. It was very obviously this guy. It's like there's literally no other explanation.
So then we get Bobby back at church, and he's talking to the priest and saying that he feels kind of conflicted now because here's this guy who, yes, did arson his own restaurant, but he did it all for his family. You know, he sacrificed for his family. He was trying to do a good thing. Meanwhile, Bobby, you know, inadvertently caused this horrible thing to happen to his family. So he feels kind of, I think, just some confliction about like conflict. He feels some conflict about, you know, why should this guy have to suffer these consequences when I didn't really have to suffer any consequences? And he mentions that I wouldn't even have this job if St. Paul hadn't whitewashed my file.
Right. And it's like specifically like, who am I to hold this guy accountable when I only have my position of authority because they pulled the strings, because they had the red tape, because they covered everything up for me. And I, was incriminated for much less noble reasons than this man who's just trying to provide for his family, right? And it's a very human like thing to wrestle with. Honestly, especially as someone who has such a low opinion of insurance companies as I do, I morally, I'm not going to say anything incriminating on air. Never mind. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, the priest goes off on something about St. Paul, like the actual saint, not the city. And honestly, I don't really care, and I want to go to bed, so I'm just going to skip over that. It's not important.
But he says something at the end. Grace is a divine gift. Grace, and so for every girl out there named Grace, you are a divine gift. Except for that one, you know who you are. But anyways.
Damn. So then we go to the hospital, and Victor/Guillermo is being discharged. His wife is there, his son is there, but Athena and Bobby show up to intercept him. And, the wife and son are like, why are you here? Like, what? But obviously the dad knows what's going on. And so he's like, guys, like, just maybe like go in the other room, like leave, like, it's okay. I've just got to talk to these guys. And, the wife and son get kind of defensive. They're like, why do they need to talk to you? Whatever. And the dad just ends up like confessing everything. Athena even tries to stop him. She's like, you really don't have to do this. But he's like, no, I did it. I started the fire. And the son gets really mad.
Oh, really mad. He's doing way too much. Like Freddie is like, well, obviously a hothead, like
he is obviously a hothead, but you can also kind of understand like kind of like what Bobby was saying, like clearly, the family was struggling and the dad just did this rash thing to try and help them. And the son is seeing the injustice in that. He's like, why should, this is so tragic and unfair that my dad should have to now, our lives are going to be even more ruined,
Oh, absolutely. The motivations are clear. I just think like thrashing against the grip of the cop trying to lead him into the other room is very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's clear that maybe this guy is dangerous.
Yeah.
Which could mean nothing.
It could mean nothing. It could mean absolutely nothing.
We cut back to Bobby at church again.
Why?
This was a point in the episode that it started to feel a little tiresome to me. I was like, why are we just doing this thing where like every other scene we're cutting back to Bobby in church? I didn't even take any notes about what happens at church this time.
Same.
And I don't really care. Again, I'm just going to move on. Because
agreed.
The important fact is we transition to a new scene, and This Must Be the Place by Talking Heads needle drop. This is like always the sequence I remember the most about this episode. I guess I just love this song. And we see this montage of like Bobby beginning again, you could say. Bobby getting his zest for life. Bobby getting his groove back. And I guess you could argue it doesn't really make sense because then when we meet Bobby in season 1, he's like extremely messed up emotionally and like essentially suicidal, which this is kind of the problem we've brought up before with the Begins episodes, which is we started this show with all these characters who were not terribly developed yet because it was the beginning of a show and they were setting them up to have character development. So when you go back and try and give them an arc before the events of the show, you kind of have to create a conflict and create development that then has to be kind of inherently cyclically undone by the rest of the show. So it doesn't really make sense, but the sequence is fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. It does feel like they're going for like sort of an emotional completeness because we saw that dream sequence of him making dinner for his family earlier in the episode. And that was like turned out to be like a nightmare scenario kind of because his family's dead. And now he gets to make dinner for his new family, right? And it's like it's sweet and it's happy. And like it does set up sort of the foundation of like what the 118 is in the first episode. But it does have that sort of like that like pang of hollowness because like you're just setting up the first episode where every character is still pretty much going through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But that being said, like I get that it has to happen for this to be satisfying in any way. Like I wouldn't want a Bobby Begins episode where it's just Bobby being like miserable and suicidal the whole time. And then that has not changed by the first episode. Like that wouldn't be good. storytelling. So like it's fine. But yeah, we see a montage of him thriving. We see him going to his AA meetings. We see him responding to calls. And finally, yeah, he's perfecting his family dinners at home.
Blatant food porn. Blatant food porn with the ribs, with everything. It's oh my god, it looks so fucking good. And and we get to see Tommy's little going away party. The cake that they make for Tommy says says like, goodbye Tommy, the 217's loss is our gain, and then Hen pushes his face into the cake. I'm like, get him again for me.
She shoves his face into the cake like a little too happily and for a little too long. It's like she's waterboarding him. She sticks his face into that cake for like a full like 2 or 3 seconds.
It would genuinely be classified as tortured if that cake had fondant in it, but I think it was just like a regular sheet cake. I think it was just buttercream. So yeah, unfortunate.
But before that, we see Bobby like calling everyone upstairs to eat his nice dinner, and everybody's kind of confused. They've never had something like this, but he's like, this is a new tradition. We're doing this. Everybody sit down. Everybody's very pleased by this. And I love the little like cuck table full of non-mains that's next to our main character table in the kitchen.
Yeah. And they're like looking over their shoulders like, oh, we're a part of this too.
It's so sad. But then after Tommy leaves.
Yeah, after Tommy leaves, we get a little bit of a time skip. And who the fuck should roll up on his first day on the job?
Well, the 118 is having dinner again, having family dinner or breakfast or lunch or something at the station. And yes, a new face shows up in town.
Who is this Evan character anyway? I just want to know.
Yes, Buck is in the house.
Mr. Buckley, yes.
Little baby Buck, and he's introducing himself for the first time. So this feels, like I said already, like there are parts of this episode that feel very like Marvel or Disney prequel, where it's like all the little Easter eggs of like how things started. But I think because we like Buck so much, this was the first one that actually felt exciting. I was like, oh my God, the first time they met Buck.
I agree. I was so excited. So I was like, oh my God, my baby's back in the house. There he is.
Yeah, Buck shows up and, they sort of mess with him at first. He's like, I was told I was supposed to report to a Captain Nash. And, Bobby looks around and he's like, do you guys know a Captain Nash? Like, nope, no Captain Nash here. But whatever. They take him in. They're like, sit down. And Buck is very, pleasantly surprised at the setup they've got. He's like, is it always like this? And Hen's like, it is, like, as long as Bobby's the captain, And I thought it was very funny that Buck seems so like sweet and bashful meeting the 118, because we know that canonically immediately after this he will start acting like a huge asshole and having sex on the job all the time. So first impressions, I guess they're not always the most revealing.
Yeah, the duality of man. And honestly, I do think like two things can kind of be true, because like as Buck gets more confident on the job, that's when his cockiness sort of comes out. But I like the idea that like whenever he introduces himself to a new group of people, even as Buck 1.0, he does have this like reserved sort of like bashfulness, like where he's like, hi guys, I'm Buck. What's your like
it's not like he would have had like none of his Buck sweetness as Buck 1.0. He was just sort of had some negative qualities in addition to his positive qualities.
This was firmly in the Jordan Peterson era of his character. I think we had a running bit about that. I don't know, it's been so long since we talked about season 1 that like I'm forgetting our running bits other than like stuck and trapped.
But finally we cut back to the present day.
Yeah.
And Bobby is in the same spot we just saw him in a few years ago, but he's now sitting in the station in the present day, in the kitchen, in his civvies, not in his uniform. And he wants to talk to everybody. Kind of echoing the scene we just saw. He's called everybody into the kitchen and he announces his suspension. Yeah. And everybody's like, what? Like, why? Why would they suspend you? And he says, because of what happened in Minnesota. And I think it's like either Buck or Eddie has a line where they're like, Minnesota? That's old news.
Yeah, that was Buck,
I've got to start using that as a reaction video for some context.
I mean, Buck, like, when he said that, like, that was perfectly, like, encapsulating my feelings on the matter. So like, that just like endeared me to him even more than I already was, which I didn't think was possible. But like, it was like, oh, me and him always on the same page. Love to see it.
Yeah, that was actually like a meta commentary on the sort of more unnecessary elements of this episode. They were like, we'll just have one character acknowledge it.
I mean, it honestly felt like the show was kind of telling on itself when they said that. Like, I don't know. It reignited my frustrations with parts of this. And so I felt kind of like validated by that in a sense, but it was also like, should I? Because it is the show. So
yeah. Well, finally, we cut back to Bobby in firefighter jail. You know, finally, we get back to our framing device, and the mysterious God voice from off screen is telling him kind of like the equivalent of like reading him his rights. They're saying like, you understand this isn't a criminal proceeding. You understand that like we're doing an investigation. Anything you say will be considered in, you know, whether we reinstate you or not. And Bobby ends the episode by saying, I just want to tell the truth.
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of implying that like everything we've just seen will also then be shown to the people at this hearing or whatever.
I feel kind of bad for them. Like, you know, how monotonous that first 15 minutes will be.
Well, listen, they never heard they never heard it the first time, right? So I think this will be much fresher on their ears in general.
Well, I hope that it hits more for them than it did for me. But I will say, as we're talking about it, I do find myself warming to this episode. I think I just got off on the wrong foot with it because we spent so long in Minnesota.
Damn.
In the beginning of the episode. But as it goes on, I think the episode improves. And I think it is generally a pretty good episode. As far as Begins episodes goes, I like it more than Hen Begins, but not nearly as much as Chimney Begins.
And you know what? That's fair. I'd probably, well, I'm going to be so honest. I think I might prefer this one to Chimney Begins, not because it's necessarily better, but because I think some of the highs in this episode are maybe higher highs than the ones in Chimney Begins to me. Like the montage of the kooky 911 calls in this one and the This Must Be the Place montage are really high highs for me.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. That's fair. I just think that like the Chimney episode was like, it was so revelatory to me on like how to do a flashback episode right.
Yeah, that one I think is definitely technically better.
Yeah, so that pushes it over the edge for me. I also don't think I'll like this episode as much as I do Buck Begins, but I also think I'm going to like it more in retrospect than Eddie Begins. So I think leaving it as like the perfect middle ground Begins episode sits pretty comfortably with me. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, this episode wasn't a bad episode. It did feel like work even just going into it for me. Not because this show feels like work or this podcast feels like work, but just because I remembered how much like I didn't really care for this episode last time I watched it. I was like clicking on the Hulu episode and I was like, ugh, I guess. But I warmed to it. I did warm to it. So, congrats 911. That's what you get for having Jennifer Lynch direct your episodes, because she can turn even what would have been a slog into an acceptable contribution. So, good job. Good job, Jennifer. And again, this is all my opinion. It's reflective only of me. So
yeah, I liked it, and you know, on like a meta level, I enjoyed our discussion of salami.
Yeah,
we got some new insights in this episode on things like that. And you know, some people may hate to see a Minnesotan man win, but I kind of just give any Minnesota content on this show a pass because I'm like, hey, that's where I live.
And I respect that.
But you know what, guys? I really want to go to bed. So
listen, guys, if ever you find yourself, you know, surrounded by a chicken wielding a knife in an illegal cockfighting ring, and your captain is an arsonist, and your coworkers are a cheater and a coke doer that saved Tommy Kennard, listen, just say no. You know, just say no. Walk off, as Sal did into that good night.
Well, I don't think he died.
Well,
Although
You
we
never
technically
know.
don't know because he hasn't returned. Yeah. Oh, R.I.P. Sal. Our
R.I.P. Sal.
headcanon is that he died after this. He walked out of the fire station and he walked like immediately into oncoming traffic by accident, or maybe like a hot air balloon fell on him or something. And that was the end of Sal. So
Goodbye. You were bigger than the whole sky.